Can we talk just a little bit about Paul Pierce's weekend? Did you see any of this?
I didn't really dive in, but enough.
Okay, so quick recap. Late Saturday night, Paul Pierce going on Instagram Live. There are exotic dancers in the background dancing and twerking and rubbing his shoulders. You can see him puffing on a blunt. And a few days later, to everybody's surprise, ESPN decided, you know what, Paul Pierce, we'd prefer it if you didn't work for us anymore.
Oh, that's weird to think they wouldn't like that.
Yeah, right? Company owned by Walt Disney. Right, I think it shocked us all.
I mean, that stuff's rampant in The Little Mermaid and Moana and Frozen. I mean, that's all the time.
So now rumors abound as to what's going to happen next with Paul Pierce's career. He's still Paul Pierce, right? I want to throw a few out there if you're okay. KU needs a new assistant coach. Jerrance Howard just took off for Texas. Paul Pierce, Kansas legend, got his jersey hanging in the rafters. If Danny Manning could do it, why couldn't Paul Pierce?
He doesn't need to coach. He doesn't need to do anything.
Well, he was making $1.5 million at ESPN, so let's just start there. Would Kansas be willing to match that contract to be an assistant coach?
They don't have to match because he's out of work. So they just have to give him a living wage, right? Like something he can survive on. That's what
it's not Best Buy, right? They're not price matching from whatever coupon he brings in. I got a better idea, though. Could Paul Pierce become the third basketball friend? Now, from a financial standpoint, we're not in any position to match or even come close to the salary he was making at ESPN. The flip side is total freedom. You want to have poker games at 5 a.m. with strippers and weed present? I got no problem with it. All we need for you to do is show up, give us your takes. And honestly, we don't even need your takes. Just sit up there, nod your head, laugh, and smile.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't do that stuff on the show, I think that'd be okay.
I disagree. I'm okay with that.
All right, we'll call this creative differences, and we'll move on.
All right, this is Basketball Friends. He's Matt Tait. I'm Nick Schwerdt. And the biggest news of what's been a wild offseason for KU basketball, unquestionably, is that Ochai Agbaji has declared for the NBA draft. He still has the chance to come back to KU. He's going to have about 3 months to make that decision. He will be hiring an agent, but will be retaining his eligibility. This is big news because I think it's the first domino to fall, whether you're talking about transfer portal guys leaving, guys coming in. This is the first piece of news that I think significantly impacts KU's ceiling next season. With Ochai on the team, you're probably looking at being a preseason top 5 team in the country. I don't know where KU would fall without him, but I mean, he enters the year being, if not the best player on the team, one of the most important players on the team.
It's very cool that he's doing this because this is the way the rules are set up. Everybody should do this. And I understand that people don't want to see their favorite players leave. And they don't also understand that this is part of the business side of this thing. But like, he'd be absolutely foolish to not do this.
It basically comes down to what is your threshold for staying in the draft. And for a lot of guys, it's getting a guaranteed contract, which means being a first-round pick. I don't think necessarily that Ochai is going to be a first-round pick. I think it's more likely he would go undrafted than be a first-round pick. Now, maybe that's okay with him. Maybe he just wants a shot, and if so, that changes the ballgame a little bit. The other big threshold for a lot of guys is, have I peaked in terms of my draft stock? Is my stock as high now as it's ever going to be, or would going back for another season maybe raise my profile to the point where next season I could be a first-round pick? Based off the leap that Ochai took from his sophomore to junior year, that another season working on some of these holes and weaknesses in his game could get him to the point where maybe in 2022 you are talking about a first-round draft pick.
Can I do any more? Like Dedrick Lawson's the perfect example of that, right? Dedrick Lawson could have come back for another year at Kansas, and even if he had played to that All-American level and done the exact same thing, it would not have made him a better prospect. In fact, if he came back and his numbers dipped from what they were his junior season, it would have made him a worse prospect. So you gotta, it's cliche as hell, but you gotta strike while the iron's hot. And that's the deal here. I mean, that's what we don't fully know about Ochai, and we have to speculate on. And what you're saying is something that I agree with. He stands to gain a lot by returning, because I think his freshman year was a little bit of a head spinning, going out there on the fly, just trying to figure it all out. Sophomore year, he was an important part of that team, but he was still a role player, very much so. This year, he stepped into a new role. He was an important piece. He had ups and downs with that. I mean, he was pretty steady, but he had ups and downs and didn't look like he fully tackled it, took over, things like that. If he could come back and show that, then that elevates his stock.
Well, I think the best example of somebody who's went through that is Frank Mason. Frank was not on the NBA's radar after his junior season. Had a huge jump from his junior to senior year, unanimous National Player of the Year, and all of a sudden is early second round pick. Specifically, though, the things that were different about Frank's game, I think are applicable to what Ochai may be looking to do, because Frank came back his senior year. All of a sudden, he went from being a good shooter to an elite shooter. And a lot of that was his ability to get his shot off his dribble. Can you improve even more to where you go from being a 37% shooter to a 42% shooter from deep? Can you improve your handles where you can beat some guys off the dribble? And can you become a consistent shooter or a more consistent shooter pulling up off the dribble? Those are all skill sets that you're going to have.
It's just like what we knew with Devon Dotson when he tested after his freshman season and he got the feedback he wanted. I mean, what did they tell him? We want to see you be more of a point guard. We know you're athletic. We know you can get to the rim. We know you can run up the floor with the ball faster than anyone in the world, maybe. But we want to see you get others involved. You know, be that guy. Be a point guard, because that's what you are at our level. So he took that to heart, put that into his game, came back and was more of a point guard. He still had to do what he had to do and was a big time scorer and all those things because Kansas needed him to be. But he still did absorb that, listen to what was being told, and then applied it to his sophomore season. And it worked out for him. I mean, he didn't get drafted, but he got a shot. So it's an individual decision for each one of these guys. And so the threshold's key. Like, do you just want a shot? You know, because I know when Devon was deciding as a freshman, that was a big part for him. Like it was basically like 40 or higher, and I'll probably go. If I can hear that I'm going to be 40 or higher, he didn't hear that. So he came back.
Ochai, to me, is the difference between them being a top 3 national championship contending team next year and just being a good team.
Why? Because you've said that, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I want to know why you think that.
Well, I think first it comes with the idea that if Ochai does come back, I could see him taking another big leap. We saw him take a huge jump from sophomore to junior year. I can't predict that it's going to happen, but imagine if he does go to the combine, they say, hey, we want to see you work on your pull-up game. We want to see that jumper become more consistent. We want to see those handles become a little tighter. We want you to be a stronger finisher. You're great in transition, but we want to see you have the ability to showcase that athleticism in the half court. I think those are the things he's going to hear. Now, you're not going to overnight become great at all of those things, but if you can just improve on a couple of those things on a roster that I think we'd both agree is going to be better suited to his skill sets. Last year's team didn't really have great playmakers, great shot creators. They're starting to assemble some of those guys, both on the recruiting trail and from the transfer portal. I think that only helps a guy like Ochai, who I think will be much better when there are other guys around him who can help create shots, draw defensive attention. I think Ochai could be in for a monster year. And if, like Frank, he develops that dribble pull-up game and becomes an elite, not just a great, but an elite jump shooter, you're talking about a monster season where I think you could be looking at a fringe All-American type year. If that's the case, KU's a title contender.
Well, where do they have better players? The next level. Do you think he is following in the path of any other former Jayhawks that have kind of been in this same position? I mean, there have been plenty of guys that go test, of course, but a lot of them kind of knew where they were. And this is one of the more unknowns, I think. I really do. Do you anyone come to mind?
Svi is an interesting one. Remember, Svi tested before the 2018 season, before his senior year. And, we asked him at Media Day the next year, what would you have needed to hear to stay in? And he said, point blank, first round pick.
Right.
If I would have been a first round pick, I would have kept my name in the draft. Svi was interesting because much more specific set of skills, right? That he was supposed to be not a great shooter, but an elite level shooter at any level. Ochai has a little bit more to his game. He's not as great of a shooter, but he has a little bit more athleticism. I think his defense gives him a better chance to sort of promote himself as a 3-and-D candidate. I don't know which way it'll go. I personally would probably err towards the side of him coming back, but not by much. I mean, maybe 65-35 that he's back with Kansas next season.
That's what you'd bet on, basically. Yeah, I think I would too, and I think those are pretty good numbers. I don't think it's a guarantee that he goes. I don't think it's a guarantee that he comes back. But I think if I had to bet today, I'd bet he comes back. Physically, though, Ochai's going to catch their eye, right? He looks like a physical specimen. I mean, that's the kind of guy you want on your roster. Just how he looks, his body, his build. You know, he carries his athleticism very well. I mean, like Wayne Selden, another guy that I thought of largely because, you know, he went undrafted. The mock drafts have Ochai pretty much undrafted. There was a Yahoo one the other day that had him 60th. Maybe that'd be okay with him. I mean, maybe being drafted is all you want. But yeah, I mean, that's why I kind of thought of Selden. I mean, it's a similar thing. And Selden's played some minutes in the NBA. He's found a path. He's created a pro career for himself.
You know what would be a funny bit would be if we could round up all the KU players who are making a decision whether or not to go pro, like the ones who go pro, and then you have the people online who say, they're not ready, right? They're not ready to go to the league. And then we have those players get together and assess the decisions made by the people who told them they weren't ready.
The backhanded aspect of that, right? Hey, you were great, but I'm just going to tell you because I know you're not ready. So keep that in mind when you're doing your thing and following your dreams. I want you to know that you're not ready.
The biggest day of his life. Go come up to somebody on the altar. Come up to a husband and wife on the altar. You're not even invited to the wedding. And right as the pastor says, and you may kiss the bride, sir, are you sure you're ready for this level of commitment? There's no going back. Maybe take another year in the dating pool and sort of raise your profile as a life partner.
You're not a great chores around the house guy. You're just not. Develop that part of your game. You know, yeah, you're good at video games. That doesn't do anything for you at the next level.
That's not going to translate.